Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon of Savage Reads, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Megan Phelps-Roper, in the Picton room. It's a bit of a backdrop.
It's incredible. And there's this amazing echo, and I laugh and it keeps going and going.
It goes on forever. So I thought I would do a quick video with Megan because her book Unfollow has genuinely been one of those books where it feels like it's changed me a little bit. And actually what I find fascinating is 10 years ago, we would not have been sat here.
No, we'd be out on I would be out on a picket line probably, and
Yeah.
you might be like walking by, being angry. I don't know if you're the type to yell, or maybe huffing a little bit or something.
No,
those poor people. Or
I think it was interesting because before I met you, I remember watching it and thinking, on one hand, I can't believe these people feel this way, and on the other hand, thinking, hang on a minute, I have a sort of something in common here in the fact that we were both ostracised at school for different ways, you for Westboro and me for being gay. For those of you who don't know what Westboro is, Megan.
Westboro is known around the world for this picketing campaign, where we would go out and stand on public sidewalks, explaining why everyone who wasn't part of our church was hellbound and was going to face curses from God now and then eternal torment in the world to come. So that led us to say things like, our most famous message was, or infamous message was, God hates fags. And so it started being about the gay community, but really quickly morphed into, again, literally everyone outside of our church. So we protested Jewish people, other Christians, we protested at sporting events, and, eventually at soldiers' funerals.
And what's amazing about your book is how it charts your journey during that time and how that was your life and your very real life, and also a happy time for you, and then actually how through social media and people not shouting at each other but having this really nice discourse and questioning, it completely turned it around for you and you ended up leaving.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, when you're holding signs that say things like God hates fags, that elicits a really negative response from outsiders. When you have a sign that says God hates you, you're going to hell, it elicits a really negative response, and so people would come out and counter-protest and drive their cars at us and yell and scream and shame and attempt to isolate us, and that is completely understandable, but it didn't do anything for me except reinforce what I was being taught by my family, which was that we are the good guys, they are the bad guys, and you can't trust them. So Westboro sees the hatred of outsiders as proof of their righteousness. My grandfather would say we should wear that as a badge of honor, and so that's how I understood it. And so yes, I was extremely happy to be hated, because it meant that I was doing the right thing.
And what's amazing about your whole book actually is it's about the power of words in so many ways. So actually the scriptures that you read and were taught, those were those words that kind of kept you in that life. But then actually words with friends was one thing that helped. The words on Twitter was one thing that helped. But also books really helped, because there was, what I love in the book is you talk about some books and how you recommended them and you start keeping a journal. I love that.
Yeah, so I just realized I never actually finished responding to what you said about Twitter being like this, the conversation on Twitter being such a powerful, it was the ability to have real conversation with outsiders, in a way that they could see my humanity and that I could see theirs. First we were able to develop rapport, and they were able to find internal contradictions in our doctrine. So yes, it was always about words. That defined I think it defines how we all understand the world. But yes, we paid very close attention. So when I left the church and lost this ideology that had been my entire identity, like my whole world was built around Westboro's doctrines, obviously you come to the place where you realize you need to know more. Like what have I been missing all the years that I was cutting off all outside ideas? What are those ideas? And I need to examine them. So a month after I left the church, my sister and I ran away to Deadwood, South Dakota, to read books. We went to a local public library and gathered books from friends, and drove 12 hours to Deadwood and started reading. And yes, I kept a reading journal, and the things that, it's one of those things, like one of the wonderful things about books is, and other kinds of words, right? So lyrics and music and from film, you very quickly find things that, even though the context can be completely different from your own life, you'll hear words that apply so perfectly to your own experiences. And that's what I found. So one of them actually ended up becoming the epigraph to the book, to my book Unfollow. I mean, and it's a line from The Great Gatsby that says, "Reserving judgments is a matter of infinite hope." And for me, that encapsulates the idea of grace. You know, the ability to look at other people as human beings, even in their worst moments, and to be able to acknowledge that there is hope for them to grow and change and evolve, and that we can contribute to their experiences in a way that can help push them towards good ideas and away from bad ones.
And the other thing I'd like to mention was Words with Friends, which came about after Twitter with your now husband, and how you started to do this Words with Friends thing. I just love that because it's a literary instant link, but also it's very romantic.
Yes, oh my gosh, it was incredibly romantic, although of course at the time I had to kind of not see it that way. But it was really all about words. I knew nothing about my husband other than, you know, the words that he was sharing with me. I didn't know what he looked like, or where he lived, or his name even. I had his initials, CG. But it was all about words. So the words that he shared, the words that we deployed on the game board. So playing Unrequited, we would like quote movies and books and, you know, musical lyrics at each other, and we were letting those words from pop culture, from literature, say things, you know, we were letting them speak for us, like to say things that we couldn't say or even acknowledge in our own minds. I'm sure he could acknowledge it now that I think about it, but I couldn't, because for Westboro it had to be all about the Bible. It had to be about God, and to have acknowledged any of the things that I was feeling, that to acknowledge it as romance would have meant the end of it. And that's actually what happened. So when it came to the point where I had a dream about meeting him, and we embrace in the dream.
I love that the way you mentioned the book, like it's almost like the most illicit thought that you could physically have.
Is hugging him, yes. And his hands are in my hair in the dream, and like I'm laughing about it now, but oh my god, like that feeling of just intense yearning was such a powerful feeling. Definitely the most powerful romantic feeling I'd ever had. And I realized, oh my god, I can never talk to him again. And so I cut off contact with him. Of course, I couldn't like stop thinking about him, and every time I encountered, you know, because our relationship had been all about words, the words were coming back to me all the time, and the music that we discussed and the books that we discussed, like all those things were constantly, it was like being saturated in his digital presence, even though he was so far away, and at that point, you know, not part of my life at all.
And also the story that you'd created together, both through this exchange, but also in your own brain, like you said.
Yeah.
But also it's down to him really that we've got the book.
Yes.
And again, this is really romantic as a Christmas present. It is if you're a book geek.
Yes. Well, he always, of course, I love his writing, and I think there are little pieces of it in my book. I don't know if you noticed, like he has this way of communicating that is so incredible to me. Like just it was really wonderful, and again, incredibly romantic. But he always talked about how much he loved my writing too. And you know, it came to this point. You know, we'd been together for over a year, and I realized that there was so much that he didn't understand about my upbringing. There were certain topics that would come up, and I would realize like he would kind of close down a little bit, and I realized like I needed to explain to him some of these things, and the only way that I was going to be able to do that effectively was in writing. And so I wrote him a 14,000 word essay that became what is now largely chapter 5, and it is the best part of the book, I think.
No, the whole book is amazing.
Thank you. But that essay became, you know, I had been really against the idea of writing a book before then, because, you know, Westboro quotes this passage, you know, oh, that mine adversary had written a book, like, in other words, laying out charges against them in writing. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to fulfill that Bible verse. And then I realized, you know, in the process of writing that essay, that there was so much value in the writing process, both for me and hopefully for others, you know, once I would finish it, and that I shouldn't let the Westboro narrative continue to control how my behavior. Like I had done that my whole life, and now I needed to, you know, I don't like fulfilling the narratives that they have of outsiders, but that can't be the controlling factor. And so that essay that I wrote for him was, I am so grateful to have had that opportunity, because going through the process of writing the book was hugely, I think, transformative for me and helpful.
You said
in
it's
processing.
freeing.
Yeah.
Because I would have felt like it was a bit self-torturous.
I think, yes. I mean, and I think there were certain members of my family who were like, why are you doing this? Clearly it is incredibly painful. And I think anybody who's gone through something traumatic, obviously you re-experience the trauma when you talk about it, but that's also the path to healing. Like finding a way of understanding it and making your way through it. So it was incredibly painful. I cried a lot, writing it. I went through, obviously this kind of roller coaster of emotion, but one thing that I hadn't realized, was that it took me, getting to the end of the first draft of the book, that where I realized like how freeing it was to, so for instance, the way I understood this was, before finishing that first draft, I would check Westboro's Twitter feeds compulsively. It was usually every single day, maybe every other day that's how long I could go without looking at it. And then for 3 weeks after I finished that first draft, 3 weeks later, I finally realized, like, oh my God, I haven't been looking at their Twitter feeds at all. And so, I mean, I still do pay attention, but I realized I had been clutching those memories to me so tightly because I was terrified of forgetting. I was terrified of losing, like, what happened and what it had done to me. And so having the opportunity to have it all written down, like, I could let them go in a way that I hadn't realized was such a burden I was carrying. And like, it's like now that burden is in this book, and it's a wonderful thing to have.
So the words have been incredibly powerful for you to write, but also you said they've been, I mean, I know that because I found the book incredibly powerful to read, but there's one particular story that I love that somebody who'd read your book told you.
Yeah, so this was one of the, I wrote the book for a lot of reasons. Obviously it was really powerful for me personally. I wrote it also for my family, who are still at Westboro, in an attempt to maybe plant seeds of doubt and help them traverse this path that I've been on for the last,
Do you know if any of them have read it?
I'm sure they have. I'm sure they have. At this point, especially, they try not to acknowledge those things, but I'm sure they have. They feel like they have to be able to address, things that ex-members have said. So
Right.
even though they like to pretend like we don't exist, they pay extremely close attention to everything that we do.
Sorry, I railroaded you.
No, but but I also wrote it for the people in the communities that we used to target, hoping that by not justifying what we did, but by explaining that maybe some healing could come from that, and explaining why I did what I did at the church, why Westboro does what it does, but also, dismantling those arguments, from the outside, hoping that some good would come from that. And it was amazing to me that the highlight of publishing this book has been, the messages of healing that have come from people like, so this one was incredibly powerful to me. It's this young man who said that when Westboro was in its heyday, he was a teenager struggling with his sexuality, and that he had, at that point, consumed Westboro's content almost compulsively as a form of self-harm. And that seeing me dismantle these arguments, now has been a kind of closure and has brought him peace. And messages like that, it just, knowing how much pain I sowed for people like him for so much of my life, to know that some good has come from publishing this book, it just is, it's incredibly powerful to me, and I'm just really, really grateful for it.
But I think so much power does come from this book because, like we were saying at the beginning, we wouldn't have had these conversations. And what's been lovely over the last few nights, because we've been doing events together, is we've found the things where we've got in common, and that's so brilliant, and that's the power of brilliant books. Finally, what one book is either your favourite book or would you recommend to everyone?
Ooh, that's a good question. I love the book Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed. Have
Oh,
you
I've not
read it?
read that, no.
Okay, so it's really, it's a book of advice columns, which sounds, it's extremely reductive, like, to, like, the quality of the writing and the messages of the stories. Like, it's really part memoir, part advice column. I am a sucker for advice columns. Like, and I hate myself for it. I'm like, if I could somehow find a way to mute all advice columns on Twitter, I absolutely would, because I fall down the rabbit hole every single time. And I'm like, why did I just do that? Why? But these are absolutely worth reading. She finds a way of framing, answers to some of life's incredibly difficult questions and really devastating situations in a way that is so full of beauty and wisdom, and it inspires strength. Like when I left Westboro and I, came to believe, I no longer believe that the Bible is the infallible Word of God. Like that was the book that had all the answers. And so, losing that and having to sort of, find other ways of answering those hard questions, reading Cheryl's book, like it is unreal. It's the book I've given as a gift more than any other to people that I love, but also literally to people that I barely know. It's like, I hear some terrible thing that someone has gone through and I'm like, you need to read this book.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it's amazing. Like there are so many books, obviously. You talk about them all the time, but that's I love that book.
Well, thank you for that recommendation, and I'm going to recommend Unfollow. Everybody needs to read it. It's one of my favourite books of the year, and for those of you who've watched this channel for a while, you'll know that I loved Maggie Nelson's The Argonauts because it took my head off, put loads of ideas in it, shook it and said go away and think about that, and you did exactly the same thing.
Oh my gosh.
But also, it's just been a joy to meet you and chat with you, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
And
Simon.
I'll see you all in another video very soon. Bye.